Don't you ever disrespect my name again!
I'm so sorry, that wasn't my intention.
She was just 9 years old, standing in the aisle of a first-class cabin, while a flight attendant refused to say her name correctly. But what that flight attendant didn't know was that this little girl was about to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. In front of cameras. In front of millions. And it all started with 3 simple syllables. Amara. This is the story of Amara Thompson, a 9-year-old girl who turned a moment of humiliation into a viral movement that changed airline policies across the country. But before we get into how she embarrassed a racist flight attendant in front of the entire world, you need to understand who Amara really was. Because this wasn't just about a mispronounced name. This was about identity, heritage, and the kind of courage most adults don't have. Let me take you back to where it all began. Amara Thompson lived in Chicago with her mother, Dr. Celeste Thompson, a pediatric surgeon who spent her days saving children's lives, and her father, Marcus Thompson, a civil rights attorney who spent his days fighting for justice. Now, you might think growing up in a household like that would make a child entitled or sheltered, but Amara was different. She was the kind of kid who helped her younger brother with his homework before doing her own. The kind of kid who practiced violin for an hour every morning before school, not because her parents forced her but because she loved it. But here's what made Amara truly exceptional. At 9 years old, she could read at a high school level. She spoke 3 languages fluently: English, French, and Yoruba. While other kids her age were watching cartoons, Amara was studying etymology, the history and origin of words, because she found it fascinating. She wanted to understand why words existed, where they came from, what they meant. And her name? Her name was everything to her. Amara. Amara. 3 syllables. Amatra. In Igbo, one of the major languages of Nigeria, it means grace. Her grandmother, who had immigrated from Nigeria to the United States back in the 1970s, had chosen that name. Her grandmother, who had faced her own battles with discrimination, who had built a life in a country that didn't always welcome her, who had raised her children to be proud of where they came from. Every Sunday, without fail, Amara would call her grandmother in Lagos. They'd talk about school, about life, about heritage. Her grandmother would speak to her in Igbo, and Amara would respond, keeping that connection alive across thousands of miles. Around Amara's wrist, she wore a bracelet her grandmother had given her. It was adorned with Adinkra symbols, traditional West African symbols that represented concepts and aphorisms. Her favorite symbol on that bracelet was Sankofa, a bird reaching backward to retrieve an egg. It meant, go back and get it. It meant, learn from the past. It meant, your history matters. That bracelet never left her wrist. It was there the morning everything changed. It was a Thursday morning in late April when the Thompson family prepared for their trip to New York City. But this wasn't a vacation. Amara was traveling to compete in the National Spelling Bee Championship. Do you understand what that means? This 9-year-old girl had spent 2 years working toward this moment. She had competed against hundreds of students in the regional competition and won. She had faced the best spellers in Illinois at the state championship and won. Now, she was one of just 50 kids in the entire country who would stand on that stage in New York. 50 kids. Out of millions. Her parents were so proud they had done something special. Instead of having Amara fly coach with them, they had purchased her a first-class ticket. It was their way of saying, you've earned this. You deserve this. Amara had been so excited when they told her. She'd never flown first class before. She imagined what it would be like having extra space to study, being able to spread out her flashcards and review her words in comfort. That morning, as they prepared to leave for the airport, Amara's mother sat her down. Dr. Thompson looked into her daughter's eyes and said something Amara would remember for the rest of her life. She said, "Baby, you're about to walk into rooms where people will judge you before you even open your mouth. They'll see your skin, they'll hear your name, and they'll make assumptions. But you carry the strength of everyone who came before you. Your grandmother left everything she knew to build a better life. Your great-grandmother survived things we can't even imagine. Their strength is in you. Be proud of your name. Be proud of who you are. Never let anyone make you feel small." Amara's father added his own advice. He knelt down, put his hand on her shoulder, and said, "If someone disrespects you, document it. Remember exactly what they said, exactly when they said it, and exactly who witnessed it. Truth is your greatest weapon." Amara nodded. She understood. At 9 years old, she understood things that most children didn't have to think about. The family arrived at Chicago O'Hare International Airport 2 hours before their flight. Amara was practically bouncing with excitement, her backpack filled with spelling bee preparation materials, flashcards organized by difficulty level, notebooks where she'd written down every word she might encounter. She had a system. She always had a system. At the check-in counter, the gate agent scanned Amara's ticket and did a double take. She looked at this 9-year-old black girl with her hair pulled back into 2 puffs adorned with colorful beads, looked at the first-class ticket, then looked back at her. The agent didn't say anything, but Amara noticed the pause. She noticed the way the woman's eyes lingered just a second too long. It was subtle. So subtle that if you weren't paying attention you'd miss it. But Amara had been trained to pay attention. Still, she smiled politely, took her boarding pass and thanked the agent. No need to make a scene over a look. Not yet, anyway. As they walked toward the gate, Amara held her mother's hand on one side and her father's on the other. They stopped at the entrance to the terminal, the point where only ticketed passengers could continue. This was where they'd separate. Her parents would board later with the coach passengers. Amara would board first with the first-class ticket holders. Her mother hugged her tight and whispered, "We're so proud of you, baby. Go show them what you're made of." Her father kissed her forehead and reminded her, "Call us if you need anything. We're just a few rows back." And then Amara was on her own, walking toward gate B17, her backpack slung over her shoulders, her grandmother's bracelet catching the fluorescent airport lights. The boarding announcement came 20 minutes later. "We'd like to welcome our first-class passengers and those needing additional time to board Flight 2847 to New York LaGuardia." Amara stood up, smoothed out her dress, a navy blue dress her mother had picked out, appropriate and respectful, and got in line. There were only a handful of first-class passengers. Mostly business people in suits, a few couples who looked like they were traveling for leisure. And then there was Amara, a 9-year-old girl with a backpack and a dream. As she approached the gate, she noticed the flight attendant checking boarding passes. The woman was white, probably in her mid-40s, with blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes had this look, this evaluating look, like she was constantly judging everyone who walked past her. Her name tag read, Rebecca Morrison. Amara handed her boarding pass to Rebecca with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am." Rebecca scanned the pass, and Amara watched her eyes move from the boarding pass to Amara's face, then back to the boarding pass. There was that pause again. That calculating pause. "Seat 2A, Rebecca said, her voice flat. Then she looked at the name on the boarding pass and attempted to pronounce it. "Amara. Go ahead." It wasn't even close. Amara kept her smile, kept her composure, and gently corrected her. "It's actually pronounced Amara, ma'am." Rebecca's expression didn't change. She barely acknowledged the correction. "Right. Whatever you say, sweetie. Seat 2A is on the left side, second row." And just like that, Amara knew. She knew this was going to be a problem. But she didn't make a scene. She thanked Rebecca, walked down the jetway, and boarded the plane. The first-class cabin was everything she'd imagined. Wide leather seats, plenty of legroom, overhead bins that actually had space. She found her seat, 2A, a window seat, and carefully placed her backpack in the compartment above. She settled in, pulled out her flashcards, and began to review. Aberration. Aberration. A departure from what is normal or expected. Cacophony. Cacophony. A harsh, discordant mixture of sounds. She was lost in her studying when she heard Rebecca's voice again, this time talking to another flight attendant, a younger woman with kind eyes and dark hair. "Parents these days," Rebecca said, her voice just loud enough for Amara to hear, "giving their kids these complicated names. How are we supposed to remember all of them?" The other flight attendant, whose name tag read Sofia Rodriguez, glanced over at Amara with an apologetic look. She didn't respond to Rebecca, just continued preparing the cabin for departure. Amara felt something twist in her stomach. Not anger, not yet. Something else. Disappointment, maybe. She'd hoped this would be different. She'd hoped that for once, just once, someone would make the effort. As the other passengers boarded, Amara noticed an elderly white woman taking the seat across the aisle from her, seat 2C. The woman had silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and was dressed elegantly but comfortably. As she settled into her seat, she smiled at Amara. "Hello, dear. Traveling alone?" Amara shook her head. "No, ma'am. My parents are in coach. I'm flying first class because I'm competing in the National Spelling Bee Championship in New York." The woman's eyes lit up. "The National Championship? That's remarkable. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Amara. Amara Thompson." The woman repeated it perfectly. "Amara. What a beautiful name. I'm Mrs. Patterson. Eleanor Patterson. I used to be a teacher, traveled all over the world teaching English. Names have always fascinated me. Amara beamed. See, it wasn't hard. This stranger had said her name correctly on the first try because she'd actually listened. Mrs. Patterson settled into her seat and pulled out a book, but kept glancing over at Amara with warm, grandmotherly interest. A few rows up, in seat 1C, a well-dressed Asian businessman was reviewing documents on his tablet. He'd noticed the exchange at the gate too, and something about it had bothered him. His name was James Chin, and he'd spent enough years in corporate America to recognize subtle discrimination when he saw it. The plane finished boarding, and the flight attendants began their pre-flight service. Rebecca came by with a tray of drinks, working her way down the first-class cabin. Amara watched her interact with the other passengers. She was perfectly pleasant, professional even. "Mr. Chin, what can I get you to drink? Mrs. Patterson, would you prefer water or juice?" And then she got to Amara. Her entire demeanor shifted. "And what would you like, Amara?" There it was again. Not even close to the correct pronunciation. Amara took a breath. Patience. Grace. Those were the lessons her grandmother had taught her. "It's Amitra, ma'am." Like as in father, ma as in mama, and Ra like the Egyptian sun god Ra. She'd even given Rebecca a guide. 3 simple comparisons. Any child could follow those instructions. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. These exotic names are so hard to remember. "Where are you from, anyway?" Amara had heard this question before. She knew what it really meant. "I'm from Chicago, ma'am." "No, I mean where are you really from?" Mrs. Patterson, who had been reading a book, looked up sharply. Her expression had changed from pleasant to stern. Amara kept her voice steady. "I was born at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, ma'am. My mother is from Illinois, my father is from Michigan, and my grandmother is from Nigeria. But I'm from Chicago." Rebecca made a dismissive sound. "I see. Well, we have apple juice, orange juice, or water." "Apple juice, please." Rebecca poured the drink with a little too much force, some of it splashing onto the tray. She handed it to Amara without making eye contact and moved on to the next passenger. Mrs. Patterson leaned across the aisle. "Young lady, I heard her say your name. It's not difficult. Amatra." She's being deliberately obtuse. Amara appreciated the support, but she also knew what her father would say. "Document. Observe. Build your case." "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson. I'm used to it." "Well, you shouldn't have to be," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You told her how to pronounce it. She should respect that." Mr. Chin turned around from his seat. "I agree. I heard the whole thing. There's no excuse for that kind of behavior." Rebecca, who had been standing near the galley, overheard this. Her face flushed red, but she didn't say anything. She just disappeared into the galley area, where Sophia was preparing the meal service. Sophia had been with the airline for just 6 months, but she'd already seen enough to know that Rebecca Morrison had a reputation. Other flight attendants whispered about her in the break rooms. There had been complaints. Multiple complaints. But Rebecca had been with the airline for 18 years and somehow nothing ever stuck. She knew how to navigate the system, how to make her discrimination seem like honest mistakes, how to weaponize plausible deniability. Sophia came by a few minutes later with a small package of cookies. She placed them on Amara's tray table and whispered, "I'm sorry about her. These are extra." Amara looked up at her. "What's your name?" "Sophia. Sophia Rodriguez." "Thank you, Sophia. That's really kind of you." Sophia gave her a small, sad smile and continued with her duties. She wanted to say more, wanted to tell Amara that she saw what was happening, that it wasn't right, that she wished she had the courage to stand up to Rebecca. But she was new, she was still on probation, and she was scared. Scared of losing her job, scared of making waves, scared of being labeled a troublemaker. The plane took off smoothly, ascending above the Chicago skyline. Amara pressed her face to the window, watching the city get smaller and smaller. Somewhere down there, in the coach section about 20 rows back, her parents were sitting, probably wondering how she was doing. She made a mental note to text them once they reached cruising altitude and the flight attendants allowed electronic devices. As the plane leveled out and the seatbelt sign turned off, Rebecca's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. You're now free to move about the cabin. We'll be beginning our first-class meal service shortly." Amara pulled out her phone, switched it to airplane mode, and opened her messages. She texted her mother first. "Mom, having some issues with the flight attendant. She won't say my name right and has been kind of rude. I'm okay though. Documenting everything like Dad taught me." Her mother's response came within seconds. "Do you want us to come up there?" "No, I'm handling it." We'll tell you everything when we land. Next, she texted her grandmother in Nigeria. Despite the time difference, her grandmother responded almost immediately. She always seemed to be awake when Amara needed her. Grandma, someone is being disrespectful about my name. Then you remind them that your name carries the strength of generations. You are Amara. You are Grace. Show them what that means. Amara smiled at her phone. Then she did something her father had taught her. She opened her notes app and began to document everything. Time, 10:47 a.m. Central Standard Time. Flight, 2847 to LaGuardia. Flight attendant, Rebecca Morrison. Incident 1, mispronounced name at boarding despite correction. Said, Amara when I clearly stated Amara. Incident 2, made comment about complicated names, loud enough for me to hear. Said, parents these days giving their kids these complicated names. Incident 3, asked where I was really from after I told her Chicago. Incident 4, mispronounced name again during drink service after I provided detailed pronunciation guide comparing it to common words. Incident 5, rolled her eyes when I corrected her. Called my name exotic and not standard. Witnesses, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, Seat 2C, Mr. James Chin, Seat 1C, Sophia Rodriguez, flight attendant. She was methodical, precise. Every detail mattered. Then Amara did something else. She turned on her phone's voice recorder. In federal airspace, passengers were allowed to record audio for personal safety and documentation purposes. Her father had taught her this. She placed the phone in her seat pocket, microphone pointing outward, and pressed record. She didn't have to wait long for the next incident. Rebecca emerged from the galley 15 minutes later with a menu and a notepad. She went to each passenger, addressing them by name, her voice smooth and professional. Mr. Chin, have you decided what you'd like? We have the chicken parmesan or the penne pasta today. Mrs. Patterson, the chicken or the pasta? The chicken is quite good, I'm told. Each interaction was polished, courteous, exactly what you'd expect from a veteran flight attendant. And then she got to Amara. The shift was immediate. Her voice changed, her posture changed, everything about her demeanor changed. And for you, little girl, we have chicken parmesan or penne pasta. Which would you prefer? Little girl. Not her name. Just little girl. Amara looked up at her, making eye contact. My name is Amara, ma'am. Rebecca sighed. Heavily. Dramatically. Like Amara had just asked her to solve a complex mathematical equation. I'm trying, but you have to understand, some names are just not standard. Standard. That word hung in the air like a weapon. Mrs. Patterson's book slammed shut with a sharp crack. Excuse me? Not standard? What exactly do you mean by that? Rebecca backpedaled, but not convincingly. I just mean that some names are more common than others, and it's difficult to remember unusual ones. Her name is 3 syllables, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice sharp as glass, carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 4 decades commanding classrooms. I learned it on the first try. Perhaps you're not trying hard enough. Mr. Chin pressed his call button. The light above his seat illuminated. Rebecca's eyes darted to it, then back to Mrs. Patterson, her face beginning to flush. Ma'am, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate your treatment of this child, Mrs. Patterson interrupted, her voice cutting through the cabin. Several other passengers were now watching the exchange. She's told you her name multiple times. She's even given you a pronunciation guide. The only reason you can't remember it is because you don't want to. Rebecca's face turned crimson. I am doing my job to the best of my ability. Your job is customer service, Mr. Chin interjected, his voice calm but firm. This is not it. I heard you earlier discussing Russian literature with the passenger in 3B. You pronounced Tchaikovsky and Dostoevsky perfectly. But somehow Amitra is too complicated. Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. She was caught and she knew it. The comparison was devastating in its simplicity. How could she claim inability to pronounce a 3-syllable name when she just demonstrated her ability to handle far more complex Russian names? That's different. She stammered. How? Mrs. Patterson demanded. How is it different? Please enlighten us. Rebecca had no answer. The silence stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. Other passengers were openly staring now, some with curiosity, others with disapproval etched on their faces. Finally, Rebecca said through gritted teeth, I'll come back for your order, and walked away quickly, her shoes clicking sharply against the cabin floor. The moment she disappeared into the galley, Mr. Chin turned to Amara. Are you all right? Amara nodded. Yes, sir. Thank you for speaking up. What she's doing is wrong, he said. I've been in corporate America for 25 years. I've seen this kind of thing too many times. The microaggressions, the subtle put-downs, the way people can make you feel like you don't belong without ever saying anything explicitly discriminatory. It's calculated. It's intentional. And it's unacceptable. Mrs. Patterson pulled out a business card from her purse. Sweetheart, I'm a retired English teacher. Taught for 40 years, traveled to 63 countries teaching. If you ever need a reference for anything, college applications, scholarships, anything at all, you call me. She handed the card to Amara. Mr. Chin did the same. I'm an executive at a tech company in New York. Same offer. What you're doing right now, staying calm, documenting, that shows more maturity than most adults I know. You're going to do great things. Amara took both cards carefully, placing them in the front pocket of her backpack. Thank you. Both of you. You didn't have to stand up for me. Yes, we did, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Because if good people stay silent, nothing ever changes. I've seen too much in my life to stay quiet when I witness injustice. Sophia appeared moments later, as if she'd been waiting for Rebecca to leave. She knelt down next to Amara's seat, her voice low. Are you okay? Amara nodded. I'm fine. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Sophia's face fell. That doesn't make it right. Listen, I need to tell you something. I've been working with Rebecca for 6 months and I've seen her do this before. Last month, there was a Muslim family, a mother in a hijab traveling with her 2 children. Rebecca questioned whether the children's tickets were legitimate, suggested they might be more comfortable in coach. The month before that, a Hispanic businessman. She insisted on seeing his passport, said his driver's license wasn't sufficient identification even though that's not policy. The company's gotten complaints but nothing ever seems to happen. She's been with the airline for 18 years and I think they're just tired of dealing with it. Or maybe they don't want to admit they have a problem. Amara absorbed this information carefully. So it wasn't just her. This was a pattern. Rebecca Morrison had a history of discrimination, targeting people who didn't fit her narrow definition of who belonged in first class. And she'd been getting away with it for years. Why hasn't anyone done anything? Amara asked. Sophia shook her head, frustration evident in her eyes. People complain, but by the time the flight is over, they're tired, they want to forget about it and move on with their lives. And Rebecca, she's smart. She knows how to word things so they seem innocent if you're not paying attention. Oh, I was just having trouble pronouncing the name. Oh, I was just verifying the ticket for security purposes. It's always just plausible enough that she gets away with it. She's mastered the art of discrimination that can't quite be proven. Amara looked down at her grandmother's bracelet, at the Sankofa symbol gleaming in the overhead light. Go back and get it. Learn from the past. Her grandmother had faced discrimination when she'd first arrived in America. Her father fought it every day in courtrooms across Chicago. Her mother encountered it in hospitals, where people sometimes questioned whether she was really a doctor or assumed she was a nurse. Maybe, Amara said slowly, her mind already working through possibilities, she just needs the right motivation to change. Sophia tilted her head, curious. What do you mean? But Amara just smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you for being kind, Sophia. I won't forget it. Sophia squeezed her hand gently and returned to her duties, but she kept glancing back at Amara throughout the flight. There was something about this child, something special. A quiet strength that reminded Sophia why she'd gotten into this profession in the first place. The flight continued. Rebecca kept her distance from Amara's row, sending Sophia to handle any requests from that section. It was cowardly and everyone noticed. Mr. Chin made a point of asking Sophia for her full name and employee number, explaining that he'd be mentioning her positively in his formal complaint. Mrs. Patterson did the same. Amara continued documenting. Every time Rebecca walked past without acknowledging her, she noted it. When Rebecca announced the flight status over the intercom, referring to updates for all passengers, but making a point of making eye contact with everyone except Amara, she noted it. The pattern was clear, undeniable. An hour into the flight, Amara pulled out her flashcards again. She needed to stay focused on the spelling bee, on the reason she was making this trip in the first place. But her mind kept drifting back to Rebecca, to Sophia's words about the other passengers who'd been treated this way, to the systematic nature of it all. Mrs. Patterson noticed her distraction. Having trouble concentrating, dear? Amara looked over at her. Mrs. Patterson, can I ask you something? In all your years of teaching, traveling, meeting people from different cultures, did you ever meet people like her? She nodded toward the galley where Rebecca was visible through the curtain. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. Unfortunately, yes. More times than I can count. I taught during the civil rights era, during desegregation. I've seen prejudice take many forms. Some of it overt, violent even. But some of it, the kind you're experiencing now, is more insidious. It's the kind that hides behind politeness, behind policy, behind plausible deniability. It's harder to fight because it's harder to prove. But you saw it, Amara said. Mr. Chin saw it. Sophia saw it. We did. But here's what I've learned in my 82 years on this earth. Witnesses are important, documentation is important, but what's most important is how you respond. You can respond with anger, which is justified but often ineffective. You can respond with silence, which is safe but changes nothing. Or you can respond with strategy, with intelligence, with the kind of grace that makes your point impossible to ignore. Amara touched her bracelet again. Grace. That word kept coming back to her. How do I do that? She asked. Mrs. Patterson smiled. I think you already know. I've been watching you. You're documenting everything, you're staying calm, you're building your case. You're thinking several steps ahead. That's not something most adults can do, let alone a 9-year-old child. Whatever you're planning, trust your instincts. The meal service began. Sophia brought Amara's chicken parmesan personally, apologizing again for Rebecca's behavior. The food was actually quite good, but Amara barely tasted it. Her mind was elsewhere, turning over possibilities, thinking through scenarios. She thought about her father, about the cases he'd won not through aggression but through meticulous preparation, through presenting evidence so compelling that the truth became undeniable. She thought about her mother, about the way she'd had to prove herself over and over again in her medical career, never letting anyone's low expectations define her capabilities. She thought about her grandmother, who'd built a life in a foreign country through sheer determination and quiet dignity. And she thought about herself, about who she was and who she wanted to be. She was Amara Thompson. She was 9 years old. She was a National Spelling Bee finalist. She spoke 3 languages. She understood the power of words, the importance of precision, the weight of meaning. And she understood something else too. Rebecca Morrison had made a mistake. Not just the mistake of being racist, though that was bad enough. She'd made the mistake of underestimating Amara. Of seeing a 9-year-old black girl and assuming she was powerless, voiceless, someone who could be dismissed without consequence. That was going to prove to be a very costly assumption. As the flight continued, Rebecca seemed to relax slightly, perhaps thinking the worst was over. She moved through the cabin, chatting pleasantly with other passengers, laughing at their jokes, being the picture of professional service. To anyone who hadn't witnessed the earlier exchanges, she would have seemed like a perfectly competent, friendly flight attendant. But Amara was recording. And Mrs. Patterson was watching. And Mr. Chen was taking notes. And Sophia was documenting everything for her own eventual report. The plane crossed into New York airspace. The pilot announced they'd be beginning their descent soon. Rebecca's voice came over the intercom again for the pre-landing preparation. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our descent into LaGuardia shortly. Please make sure your seatbelts are fastened, your tray tables are up and locked, and your seats are in the upright position. We should be landing in approximately 20 minutes. She moved through the cabin doing her final checks. She was thorough with every row, making sure everything was properly stowed, offering assistance, being helpful and professional. When she got to Amara's row, everything changed again. Passenger in seat 2A, she said, deliberately looking at Amara but refusing to use her name, please put away your electronic device and make sure your seatbelt is fastened. Amara was already complying, her phone already tucked into her backpack, her seatbelt already secure. Yes, ma'am. And my name is Amara. Rebecca's jaw tightened visibly. Your tray table needs to be up. It is up, ma'am. Well, make sure it stays that way. It was such a small thing. Such a petty, small exercise of the tiny amount of power Rebecca had. But it was the final straw for Mrs. Patterson. Young lady, she said to Rebecca, her voice carrying the full weight of her 82 years and 4 decades of teaching experience, I have been watching you for the past 2 hours and 15 minutes, and your behavior toward this child is absolutely unacceptable. Several passengers turned to watch. The cabin went quiet. Mrs. Patterson continued, you have repeatedly refused to use her name despite multiple corrections. You have questioned her presence in first class without cause. You have treated her differently than every other passenger in this section. And I want you to know that I am documenting all of this in detail, and I will be filing a formal complaint with your airline, with the Better Business Bureau, and with every consumer protection agency I can find the moment we land. Mr. Chin nodded. As will I. I'm also going to be sharing this experience on social media and with every business network I'm part of. What you're doing is discrimination, plain and simple. It's illegal, it's immoral, and it's going to have consequences. Rebecca's face went through a rapid series of color changes. Pale, then red, then pale again. I have not discriminated against anyone. I've been nothing but professional. Professional? Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. Is it professional to ask a passenger where they're really from? Is it professional to call someone's name not standard? Is it professional to refuse to use a child's name even after she's patiently explained it to you multiple times? I heard you earlier, Mr. Chin added, his voice still calm but unyielding, discussing Russian literature with the passenger in seat 3B. You pronounced Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky, and Nabokov without any difficulty. You even corrected that passenger's pronunciation of Solzhenitsyn. But somehow, a three-syllable name with clear pronunciation is beyond your capabilities. Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. That's different. How? Mrs. Patterson demanded. How is it different? Please enlighten us. We're all very curious to understand how Russian names are easier for you than an Igbo name. Is it because one is European and the other is African? Is that the distinction you're making? Rebecca's eyes widened. She'd been caught in her own trap, her discrimination laid bare for everyone to see. I never said that. You didn't have to say it, Mr. Chin interrupted. Your action said it for you. Every single interaction you've had with this child has been disrespectful. Every single one. And we've all witnessed it. A passenger from row 3 spoke up, a woman Amara hadn't noticed before. I've been listening to this whole thing. She's right. You've been awful to that little girl for no reason. Another passenger nodded. I noticed it too. The way you've been treating her versus everyone else. It's night and day. Rebecca looked around the cabin, realizing that what she'd thought was subtle had actually been obvious to everyone. She'd been so confident in her ability to maintain plausible deniability that she hadn't noticed how many people were paying attention. I need to continue my cabin check, she said finally, her voice shaking slightly. She practically fled toward the back of the plane. The moment she was out of sight, Sophia appeared. She'd been in the galley listening to everything. She knelt next to Amara's seat, her eyes shining with something that looked like a mixture of pride and regret. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Amara asked. For standing up. For not letting her get away with it. I've wanted to report her for months, but I was scared. I'm still on probation and I thought if I made waves I'd lose my job. But watching you, a 9-year-old kid, handle this with so much grace and strength, you gave me courage. I'm going to file a report too. A real one with specifics, with dates and incidents. I've kept notes. I just didn't have the guts to do anything with them until now. Amara smiled at her. What's your last name again, Sophia? Rodriguez. Why? I just want to remember the people who were kind to me today, Amara said. And I want to remember the people who weren't. The plane began its final descent. Amara looked out the window at New York City coming into view. The skyline was magnificent, buildings stretching up toward the clouds, the rivers and bridges catching the afternoon sun. Somewhere down there was the venue where she'd compete in the spelling bee. Somewhere down there was the next chapter of her story. But first there was something else she needed to do. The wheels touched down on the runway with a gentle bump. They'd arrived in New York. The plane taxied toward the gate, and Amara could feel her heart beginning to beat faster. Not from nervousness but from anticipation. Everything she'd documented, everything she'd recorded, everything she'd observed, it was all leading to this moment. The plane came to a stop at the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft chime. Passengers began standing, retrieving luggage from overhead bins, preparing to deplane. The usual organized chaos of an arriving flight. Amara stayed in her seat, waiting patiently. Her parents would be deplaning from coach soon, and she'd meet them at the gate. But she also knew something they didn't know yet. Something she'd discovered in a text from her mother while they were in the air. The local New York news had reached out. They wanted to do a human interest story about the youngest national spelling bee finalist in 15 years. A 9-year-old prodigy from Chicago. They wanted to interview her at the airport before the competition. Amara had texted back a simple reply, yes. I'd love to talk to them. Sophia came by as the cabin emptied. Good luck at your competition. And thank you again. You've changed things today even if you don't realize it yet. Amara stood and gathered her backpack. Sophia, can I tell you something my grandmother told me? She said that standing up for what's right isn't just about that one moment. It's about all the moments that come after. Because when you speak up, you make it easier for the next person to speak up too. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Amara into a quick hug. You're wise beyond your years, you know that? Amara walked up the jetway and into LaGuardia Airport. The gate area was crowded with people waiting to board the next flight, people meeting arriving passengers, airline staff managing the chaos. And there, standing near the windows, she saw them. Her parents. Her mother in a sharp professional dress, her father in a perfectly tailored suit. They looked worried, and Amara realized they'd gotten her texts about the problems with the flight attendant. They were probably concerned, wondering if she was okay, preparing to file complaints and take action. But there was something else. Someone else. A reporter with a microphone, a cameraman with a professional rig on his shoulder, standing right next to her parents. The reporter was a woman with auburn hair and a professional smile, checking something on her phone, clearly waiting. Amara's mother spotted her first. Baby. She rushed over, pulling Amara into a tight hug. Are you okay? Your texts. I'm fine, Mom. Actually, I'm better than fine. I have a lot to tell you. Her father joined them, kneeling down to look Amara in the eye. You said you were documenting everything. Do you have it? Amara patted her backpack. All of it. Notes, audio recordings, witness information. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson in Seat 2C and Mr. James Chen in Seat 1C both gave me their cards and said they'd provide statements. Sofia Rodriguez, one of the flight attendants, is filing her own report. Marcus Thompson's expression shifted from concern to something that looked almost like pride. That's my girl. You built a case. The reporter noticed them and approached. Amara. Amara Thompson. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We spoke with your mother about doing a quick interview before your big competition. Is now still a good time? Amara looked at her parents. Her mother nodded. Her father squeezed her shoulder. Actually, Ms. Walsh, Amara said, her voice clear and confident, now is a perfect time. I have a lot to say. The cameraman turned on his equipment. The red light blinked on. And Rebecca Morrison, who had just emerged from the jetway pulling her small roller bag, clearly ready to disappear into the airport and forget this flight ever happened, suddenly froze. Because she heard Amara's voice, amplified now by a professional microphone, speaking to a news camera. And she had a very, very bad feeling about what was going to happen next. Jennifer Walsh smiled at the camera, then at Amara. We're here at LaGuardia Airport with Amara Thompson, a 9-year-old spelling bee champion from Chicago who's about to compete in the national championship. Amara, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. How are you feeling about the competition? Amara smiled politely. I'm feeling confident, Ms. Walsh. I've prepared for 2 years for this moment. That's wonderful dedication. Your story is inspiring to a lot of young people. Now, I understand you just arrived on a flight from Chicago. How was your journey? This was it. The moment. Amara glanced at her father, who gave her the slightest nod. Permission. Support. Trust. It was educational, Ms. Walsh, Amara said. Very educational. Jennifer Walsh's reporter instincts immediately picked up on something in Amara's tone. Educational? How so? Amara took a breath. Well, Ms. Walsh, I learned that even in 2025, some people still have trouble with names that don't sound like theirs. I learned that discrimination doesn't always look like what you see in history books. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's someone repeatedly refusing to say your name correctly, even after you've explained it multiple times. The reporter's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the feel-good fluff piece she'd planned. This was something bigger. Are you saying something happened on your flight? Yes, ma'am. The flight attendant, Rebecca Morrison, couldn't, or wouldn't, say my name correctly for the entire 2-hour flight. Rebecca, who had been trying to slip away unnoticed, stopped in her tracks. Several people in the gate area turned to look. The cameraman, sensing a story, adjusted his angle to capture more of the scene. Jennifer Walsh's journalist mode fully activated. That must have been frustrating. Can you tell us more about what happened? And Amara did. She told them everything. She explained how she'd corrected Rebecca's pronunciation multiple times, using simple comparisons to common words. She talked about being asked where she was really from. She mentioned Rebecca's comment about her name not being standard. She described how Rebecca had addressed every other passenger by name but repeatedly called her little girl. She was calm. She was articulate. She was factual. And she was devastating. My name is beautiful, Amara said, looking directly into the camera. It was chosen by my grandmother, who came to this country from Nigeria in 1971. It means grace in Igbo. It's part of my heritage, part of my identity. And it's not complicated. It's 3 syllables. Amatra. She paused, then added, the same flight attendant who claimed she couldn't remember my name had no trouble pronouncing Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky, and Solzhenitsyn when discussing Russian literature with another passenger. So it's not about difficulty. It's about respect. Or the lack of it. Mrs. Patterson had emerged from the jetway and immediately grasped what was happening. She walked straight up to the camera. I'm Eleanor Patterson. I was seated in 2C on that flight, and I witnessed everything this child is describing. It was blatant discrimination. I've filed a formal complaint with the airline, and I'm prepared to provide a detailed statement to anyone who needs it. Mr. Chin appeared moments later. James Chin, seat 1C. Same flight. I witnessed the same behavior and recorded parts of it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was targeted, systematic mistreatment of a child based on her name and, let's be honest, her race. Jennifer Walsh turned to her cameraman. Are you getting all this? He nodded, camera still rolling. Sophia emerged from the jetway in her flight attendant uniform. She looked scared but determined. I'm Sophia Rodriguez. I was working that flight. I've witnessed Flight Attendant Morrison treat multiple passengers this way over the past 6 months. I've been afraid to speak up because I'm new and on probation, but I can't stay silent anymore. I'm filing a formal report with detailed documentation. And then Rebecca herself appeared, her face pale, her hands shaking slightly. She tried to walk past to pretend she hadn't heard any of this, but Jennifer Walsh was faster. Ma'am, excuse me. Ma'am, are you Rebecca Morrison? Rebecca stopped. She couldn't run now, not with cameras on her, not with a crowd gathering. Yes, but I really need to. You're the flight attendant Amara has been describing? There's been a misunderstanding. What's the misunderstanding? Jennifer asked, microphone extended. Rebecca looked around desperately, like she was searching for an escape route. I apologize if there was any confusion, but names from foreign cultures can be challenging. Foreign. Marcus Thompson stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried the full authority of a civil rights attorney who'd spent 15 years fighting cases just like this. My daughter was born in Chicago. Her name is Nigerian, yes, because her grandmother is Nigerian American. That doesn't make it foreign. It makes it American. This country is built on diversity. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Rebecca. I'm Marcus Thompson, civil rights attorney. What you did to my daughter today is a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. Your repeated refusal to use her name correctly, your questioning of her presence in first class, your different treatment of her compared to other passengers, all of that constitutes discrimination. Rebecca's face went from pale to ashen. I didn't mean to discriminate. Intent is irrelevant, Marcus said. Impact is what matters. And the impact of your behavior was to make my 9-year-old daughter feel unwelcome and disrespected on what should have been a celebratory flight to the biggest competition of her life. An airline supervisor appeared, a man in a dark suit with a name tag that read, Michael Stevens, station manager. He'd been alerted by gate staff that something was happening. He'd come to do damage control. But the situation was already far beyond his ability to contain it. What's going on here? He asked, though it was clear from his expression that he'd already gathered the general situation. Jennifer Walsh turned her microphone to him. Mr. Stevens, I'm Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News. We're here interviewing Amara Thompson, a 9-year-old National Spelling Bee finalist, who says she experienced discrimination from one of your flight attendants. Do you have a comment? Michael Stevens looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. We would need to investigate any claims before commenting officially. There were multiple witnesses, Mr. Chin said. I have audio recordings. This child has detailed documentation. Your own flight attendant is confirming the pattern of behavior. What exactly needs to be investigated? By now, a crowd had gathered. Other passengers from the flight were stopping to watch. People filming on their phones. This wasn't just a news interview anymore. This was a moment. And Amara stood at the center of it, calm and composed, her grandmother's bracelet catching the light. Jennifer Walsh turned back to Amara. Amara, after everything that happened on that flight, how are you feeling right now? Amara thought carefully before answering. I'm feeling hopeful, Ms. Walsh. Hopeful. That's surprising. Why hopeful? Because, Amara said, I think Ms. Morrison gave me an opportunity. Not intentionally, but she did. She gave me an opportunity to show that you don't have to be big to stand up for yourself. You don't have to be an adult to know your worth. And you don't have to accept disrespect just because someone has a little bit of power over you. She looked directly at the camera. My name is Amara Thompson. Amara. It's pronounced Amatra. It means grace. And I learned today that grace doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Grace means standing up for yourself with dignity. Grace means documenting the truth and speaking it clearly. Grace means giving people a chance to do better but not accepting it when they choose not to. Then she did something that would become the defining moment of the entire incident. She turned to Rebecca Morrison and said, Ms. Morrison, I want to make sure I have your name right. Is it Ruh-BEH-kuh? Or Ree-BECK-uh? Or maybe Ree-BECK-uh? I get confused with these standard names. The parallel was perfect. The irony was devastating. And Rebecca Morrison, finally understanding what it felt like to have her name deliberately mispronounced, stood there with her mouth open, unable to respond. Amara continued, but unlike you, if you correct me, I'll say it right. Because someone's name is part of their identity. It deserves respect. Every single time. The crowd that had gathered burst into spontaneous applause. People were filming on their phones, already uploading to social media. The cameraman had captured everything. Rebecca Morrison's eyes filled with tears. Whether they were tears of shame, anger, or self-pity, no one could tell. She looked at the supervisor. I need to go. Michael Stevens nodded. Yes, you do. We'll be in touch. As Rebecca walked away, her roller bag clicking loudly in the suddenly quiet gate area, Sophia called after her. For what it's worth, I hope this teaches you something. I hope it teaches all of us something. Michael Stevens turned to the Thompson family. On behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for what happened. This is absolutely not reflective of our values or our training. We will be conducting a full investigation, and there will be consequences. Marcus Thompson handed him a card. We'll be filing a formal complaint. We expect a thorough investigation and we expect meaningful policy changes, not just disciplinary action against one employee. We don't want vouchers or compensation, Dr. Celeste Thompson added, speaking for the first time. We want systemic change. We want mandatory training for all employees on cultural competency and unconscious bias. We want accountability measures. We want to make sure no other child has to go through what our daughter experienced today. Michael Stevens nodded, looking genuinely shaken. I understand. We'll be in touch. And again, I'm truly sorry. The interview wrapped up shortly after. Jennifer Walsh thanked Amara and her family, promising that the story would air on the evening news. She was already on her phone with her producers, telling them this was bigger than a simple human interest story about a spelling bee contestant. This was a story about discrimination, about standing up for yourself, about the kind of courage that most adults don't have. As the crowd dispersed and the Thompson family prepared to head to their hotel, Mrs. Patterson approached one more time. Amara, she said, I've lived 82 years. I've seen a lot. But what I witnessed today, what you did today, that's something I'll never forget. You handled that situation with more grace and wisdom than people 3 times your age. Your grandmother chose the perfect name for you. Amara hugged her. Thank you for standing up for me, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for showing an old woman that the next generation is going to be just fine, Mrs. Patterson replied. Mr. Chin shook hands with Marcus Thompson, exchanging contact information. If you need anything for your complaint, character witnesses, documentation, anything, you have my number. As they left the airport and climbed into a taxi headed for their hotel, Amara sat between her parents, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. You proud of yourself, baby? Dr. Thompson asked. Amara thought about it. I'm proud I didn't back down. I'm proud I documented everything like Dad taught me. I'm proud I stayed calm. But mostly I'm proud that maybe, just maybe, the next kid who flies with that airline won't have to go through what I did. Marcus Thompson kissed the top of her head. You did good, sweetheart. Real good. You made your case, you presented your evidence, and you spoke your truth. That's all anyone can do. That evening, as the Thompson family settled into their hotel room, Amara's phone started buzzing. Text messages from friends who'd seen the interview. It had aired on the 6 o'clock news and was already being shared online. The video of Amara deliberately mispronouncing Rebecca's name was going viral. Her grandmother called from Nigeria, tears in her voice. I saw the video. Someone sent it to me. Oh, my dear child. You showed them what Amara means. You showed them grace. I tried, Grandma. I really tried to handle it the way you would have. You did better than I would have, her grandmother said. At your age, I would have been too scared. You weren't scared. You were strategic. You were strong. You were everything I hoped you'd be when I chose that name for you. Over the next few days, as Amara prepared for the spelling bee competition, the story continued to grow. The original news interview had been picked up by national outlets. Social media was flooded with people sharing their own experiences of having their names mispronounced, dismissed, or mocked. A hashtag started trending, #SayHerName, though this one was about respect and identity rather than tragedy. Other passengers from other flights started coming forward with their own stories about Rebecca Morrison. A Muslim family described how she'd questioned whether their children should be in first class. A Hispanic businessman talked about being asked for additional identification beyond what was required. An Asian woman described being asked if she spoke English before Rebecca would explain the safety procedures. Sofia Rodriguez filed her detailed report, including dates, times, and specifics of incidents she'd witnessed over 6 months. The airline couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. On the third day after the flight, the airline issued a statement. Flight attendant Rebecca Morrison had been terminated effective immediately. The company was implementing mandatory cultural competency training for all employees. They were creating a new complaint process specifically for discrimination issues. They were partnering with diversity and inclusion consultants to review and revise all their policies. Marcus Thompson's phone rang. It was Michael Stevens, the station manager. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to give you a personal update. We've completed our investigation. In addition to the termination, we're making systemic changes. We're also reaching out to the passengers Ms. Morrison discriminated against in previous incidents to apologize and make amends." "That's a start," Marcus said. "But we want to see the actual policy changes in writing. We want to see the training curriculum. We want to see real accountability measures. You'll have all of that. I give you my word." "Words are easy, Mr. Stevens. Actions matter." "I understand. And Mr. Thompson? Your daughter, what she did took real courage. She could have stayed quiet, filed a complaint after the fact, let it disappear into the system. Instead, she spoke up immediately, documented everything, and made it impossible to ignore. She's remarkable." Marcus looked over at Amara, who was sitting on the hotel bed surrounded by flashcards, preparing for the next day's spelling bee competition. "Yes," he said quietly. "She is." The National Spelling Bee Championship was held in a massive auditorium in Manhattan. 50 kids from across the country, each one representing hundreds of hours of study, thousands of words memorized, dreams of victory. Amara stood backstage waiting for her turn. Her parents were in the audience. Her grandmother was watching via live stream in Lagos. Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Chen had both sent messages of encouragement. The moderator called her to the stage. Contestant number 17, Amara Thompson from Chicago, Illinois. The audience applauded politely. But there were some who applauded louder, people who recognized her from the news coverage who wanted to show their support. Amara walked to the microphone with confidence. The bright stage lights made it hard to see the audience, but she could feel their attention, their anticipation. The first word was given. Perspicacious. Amara smiled slightly. "May I have the definition, please? Having a ready insight into and understanding of things." "May I have the etymology?" "From the Latin perspicax, meaning sharp-sighted." Amara closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Then she spelled it clearly, precisely. Perspicacious. 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 "That is correct." Round after round, Amara advanced. Words that would stump most adults she spelled with calm precision. Obsequious. Pulchritudinous. Schadenfreude. Onomatopoeia. Each one she approached the same way. Ask for the definition. Ask for the etymology. Consider the root language. Spell it clearly. The competition narrowed. 50 contestants became 25, became 12, became 5. Amara was still standing. The final round came down to 2 contestants. Amara and a boy from Boston named Daniel Chin, no relation to James Chin but coincidentally also Asian American, also someone who understood what it meant to have your name mispronounced, your identity questioned. The moderator gave Daniel his word. Prestidigitation. Daniel spelled it correctly. The audience applauded. Amara's turn. She stepped up to the microphone. The moderator smiled at her. "Your word is amaranthine." Amara's eyes widened slightly. Of all the words in the English language, of all the possible combinations they could have given her, they'd given her this one. Amaranthine. From amaranth, a flower that never fades. Meaning eternal, undying, everlasting. A flower whose name sounded almost exactly like hers. She couldn't help but smile. The universe had a sense of humor. "May I have the definition, please?" Amaranthine. Adjective. Undying, immortal, or eternally beautiful. May I have it used in a sentence? The amaranthine flame of hope burns in every generation. Amara touched her grandmother's bracelet. She thought about her name, about what it meant, about everything that had happened over the past few days. About Rebecca Morrison, who'd thought Amara's name was too complicated to remember. About all the people who'd stood up for her. About her grandmother, who'd chosen a name meaning grace and given it to a child who would one day live up to it. Amaranthine, she said clearly. Amaranthine, amaranthine. The pause seemed to last forever. The moderator looked at her card. Looked at Amara. Smiled. That is correct. Amara Thompson from Chicago, Illinois, is our national spelling bee champion. The auditorium erupted. Amara's parents were on their feet, tears streaming down their faces. In Lagos, her grandmother was crying and praying and laughing all at once. Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Chen, watching from their homes, both sent congratulatory messages immediately. But more than that, people who'd been following Amara's story, who'd seen the airport interview, who'd watched a 9-year-old girl stand up to discrimination with grace and courage, they were celebrating too. Not just because she'd won a spelling bee, though that was impressive enough, but because she represented something larger. She represented the power of knowing your worth, of refusing to be diminished, of speaking truth to power regardless of your age or size. Amara stood on that stage holding her trophy and looked out at the audience. She thought about how much had changed in just a few days. How a flight that should have been about celebrating her achievement had turned into a lesson in discrimination. How she could have stayed quiet, could have just accepted the disrespect and moved on. But she hadn't. She'd stood up. She'd spoken up. And in doing so, she'd changed not just her own situation, but potentially the experiences of thousands of future passengers. The press conference after the competition was packed. Reporters wanted to know about her spelling bee preparation, her study methods, her favorite words. But they also wanted to know about the flight, about Rebecca Morrison, about what had happened at the airport. One reporter asked, "Amara, your final winning word was amaranthine, which sounds very similar to your own name. How did that feel?" Amara thought about it. It felt like things coming full circle. The word amaranthine means something that never dies, that lasts forever. I think that's what happens when you stand up for yourself. The impact lasts. It ripples out. Maybe Rebecca Morrison will think twice before treating someone else that way. Maybe the airline will actually change its policies. Maybe some other kid watching this will realize they don't have to accept disrespect, that their name matters, that their identity matters. "Do you have any message for Rebecca Morrison?" another reporter asked. Amara was quiet for a moment. "I hope she learns from this. I hope she understands that everyone's name is important, everyone's heritage is valuable, everyone deserves respect. I don't hate her. I just want her to do better. I want everyone to do better." "And what's next for you?" someone asked. Amara smiled. "Well, I'm 9 years old. I still have 4th grade to finish. But I think I might want to be a civil rights attorney like my dad. Or maybe work in education like Mrs. Patterson, the teacher who stood up for me on the flight. Or maybe I'll do something completely different. But whatever I do, I'll remember this week. I'll remember that speaking up matters. That documentation matters. That witnesses matter. That truth matters." The video of the press conference, like the airport interview before it, went viral. Amara became a symbol for a generation of children who were tired of having their names mispronounced, their cultures dismissed, their identities questioned. Schools started using her story in lessons about standing up to discrimination. The airport interview became a case study in communication classes, in diversity training programs, in discussions about unconscious bias. Rebecca Morrison, for her part, disappeared from public view. Some reports said she'd moved to another state, trying to escape the notoriety. Others said she was in therapy, trying to understand and unlearn the prejudices she'd carried. A few months later, a letter appeared on a public forum, anonymous but widely believed to be from her. It read, "I'm the flight attendant from the Amara Thompson incident. I'm not asking for forgiveness or sympathy. I'm writing this because I need to say something I should have said that day. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I told myself I wasn't racist, that I was just having trouble with pronunciation, that it wasn't my fault if some names were harder than others. But that was a lie. I didn't want to put in the effort because I didn't think she deserved it. And I didn't think she deserved it because of who she was and what she looked like. That's racism. Plain and simple. I lost my job, but I deserved to lose it. What I did to that child and to others before her was harmful. I'm trying to do better now. I'm in counseling. I'm reading. I'm listening. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt a child and justify it to myself. If anyone reading this recognizes themselves in my story, if you've ever dismissed someone's name as too complicated, if you've ever asked someone where they're really from, if you've ever made assumptions about who belongs where based on how they look, please stop. Please do better. Don't wait until a 9-year-old has to teach you what you should have already known. Whether the letter was genuine or not, whether it represented real change or just damage control, people debated. But the conversation itself was valuable. It forced people to examine their own biases, their own assumptions, their own casual cruelties. 6 months after the incident, the airline invited Amara and her family to a special ceremony. They'd completed their policy overhaul and wanted Amara to be part of the announcement. Initially, Marcus and Celeste were skeptical. This seemed like a publicity stunt, a way for the airline to rehabilitate its image. But when they saw the actual changes, they reconsidered. The airline had implemented comprehensive bias training for all employees, not just a one-time session but ongoing education. They'd created an independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints. They'd partnered with cultural organizations to ensure their hiring and promotion practices were equitable. They'd established a scholarship fund for students from underrepresented communities who wanted to study aviation. At the ceremony, Michael Stevens spoke. 6 months ago we failed. We failed Amara Thompson. We failed the other passengers who'd experienced discrimination. We failed our own stated values. But because one brave 9-year-old girl refused to stay silent, we had to confront our failures. We had to do better. And while we still have work to do, while we'll always have work to do, we're committed to that journey. Amara was invited to speak. She stood at the podium, now 10 years old, a little taller, a little older, but still with that same quiet confidence. "Thank you for inviting my family here today," she began. 6 months ago, I got on a plane excited about my spelling bee competition. I ended up learning something more important than any word I could spell. I learned that change is possible, but only if people speak up. Only if they document. Only if they refuse to accept, that's just how things are. She paused, looking out at the audience of airline employees, reporters, and community members. "My name is Amara. It means grace. For a long time, I thought grace meant being nice, being polite, accepting things quietly. But I learned that real grace is stronger than that. Grace means standing firm in your dignity. Grace means insisting on respect for yourself and for others. Grace means speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." She held up her wrist, showing her grandmother's bracelet. "My grandmother gave me this. It has a symbol called Sankofa, which means, go back and get it. Learn from the past. Remember where you came from. Don't forget the lessons. I won't forget what happened on that flight. But I also won't let it define me. I'll let it strengthen me. And I hope in some small way, it's helped strengthen all of us." The applause was thunderous. But more importantly, the impact was real. In the following years, other airlines adopted similar policies. Schools incorporated Amara's story into their anti-bullying curricula. Parents used it to teach their children about standing up for themselves. Sofia Rodriguez was promoted to a senior position in the airline's new diversity and inclusion department. She'd found her courage that day on the flight, watching a 9-year-old refuse to be diminished, and she'd never lost it again. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson wrote a book about her experiences teaching in 63 countries, and she dedicated it to Amara, who taught me that the most important lessons don't always come from the teacher. James Chin started a mentorship program at his tech company, specifically focused on helping young people from underrepresented backgrounds navigate professional environments where they might face discrimination. And Amara? She went back to being a kid. She finished 4th grade, then 5th, then 6th. She competed in more spelling bees, winning some, losing others. She learned to play new instruments. She studied more languages. She made friends and had sleepovers and worried about homework and celebrated birthdays. But she also became an advocate. She spoke at schools about the importance of cultural respect. She wrote articles for children's magazines about standing up to discrimination. She worked with her father on some of his civil rights cases, learning the law, understanding how to fight for justice within the system. When she turned 13, a journalist asked her if she'd ever forgiven Rebecca Morrison. Amara thought carefully before answering. "Forgiveness is complicated. I don't carry anger toward her anymore. That would just hurt me, not her. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means acknowledging what happened, learning from it, and choosing not to let it poison your future. She taught me something valuable, even if she didn't mean to. She taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. That my voice matters. That silence is often more comfortable, but speaking up is more important. If you could say something to her now, what would it be? The journalist asked. I'd say thank you for the lesson even though you didn't mean to teach it. I'd say I hope you've learned too. And I'd say that we're all capable of being better than our worst moments, but only if we're willing to admit when we're wrong and commit to doing better. The interview ended, but Amara sat thinking for a while after the journalist left. She thought about that day at the airport, about standing in front of a news camera and deliberately mispronouncing Rebecca's name to make a point. At the time, she'd thought it was brilliant, a perfect mirror to hold up to show Rebecca how it felt. But now, older and with more perspective, she wondered if there might have been an even better way. Could she have made her point without that moment of pettiness, however justified it might have seemed? Could she have maintained the moral high ground without stooping, even briefly, to the same tactic she was criticizing? She wasn't sure. And maybe that was okay. Maybe perfection wasn't the point. Maybe the point was trying, learning, growing, being willing to question yourself even when you were right about the larger issue. Her grandmother, now in her 80s, called that evening. They still talked every Sunday, sometimes more often. I read your interview, my dear. What did you think, Grandma? I think you're becoming the woman I always hoped you'd be. Strong but questioning. Confident but humble. Powerful but kind. That's what Amara means. Not just grace in the sense of elegance, but grace in the sense of mercy, of understanding, of forgiveness without forgetting. I still don't know if I handled everything right, Amara admitted. No one ever does, child. We do our best with what we know at the time. The important thing is that you spoke up. You documented your truth. You didn't let someone make you feel small. And in doing so, you made things better not just for yourself but for others. That's all any of us can hope to do. Years passed. Amara went to high school, excelled in debate and mock trial, volunteered with civil rights organizations. She applied to colleges with an essay about the flight, about what it taught her about justice, about speaking up, about the complexity of forgiveness and accountability. She was accepted to her first choice, planning to study law like her father, but also education like Mrs. Patterson, hoping to combine both to fight for systemic change in schools. The day before she left for college, she went through her room, packing up the memories of her childhood. She found the business cards Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Chen had given her that day at the airport. She found her notes from the flight, carefully documented evidence she'd never needed to use in court but that had changed everything anyway. She found her National Spelling Bee trophy, the word amaranthine, still making her smile. And she found something else. A letter that had arrived a few years ago, addressed to her with no return address. She'd read it once and put it away, not sure what to do with it. She opened it again now. Dear Amara, you don't know me but you changed my life. I was on your flight that day, sitting in row 5. I saw everything that happened. I watched you stand up for yourself with such dignity. I watched other passengers support you. I watched the flight attendants' discrimination get exposed. Here's what you don't know. I work in HR for a major corporation. I've been in charge of hiring for 15 years. And if I'm being honest with myself, I've been Rebecca Morrison. Not as obviously, not as blatantly, but I've dismissed candidates with difficult names. I've made assumptions about who would fit our culture. I've prioritized culture fit over qualifications in ways that really meant people who look and sound like us. Watching a 9-year-old call out what I'd been doing for years, watching her refuse to accept disrespect, it broke something open in me. I went back to my office and looked at our hiring data. The patterns were undeniable. We'd been systematically excluding people, not through explicit policy but through 1,000 small biases. I changed our hiring process. I implemented blind resume reviews where names are removed. I restructured interviews to focus on skills and experience rather than gut feelings. I brought in diversity consultants. I fought with executives who resisted these changes. It's been hard. Some people call me too woke, too concerned with political correctness. But our company is better now. More diverse, more innovative, more representative of the world we actually live in. I'm writing to say thank you. Thank you for not staying quiet. Thank you for documenting. Thank you for speaking up. You didn't just change one flight attendant's behavior. You changed me. And through me, you've changed opportunities for hundreds of people who might have been dismissed because their names didn't sound standard. You probably won't remember me. You probably received hundreds of letters after that day. But I'll remember you. Every time I review a resume, every time I interview a candidate, every time I hear someone make an assumption about who belongs, I'll remember a 9-year-old girl who knew her worth and refused to be diminished. With gratitude and respect. Someone trying to do better. Amara folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box of things she was taking to college. Reminders of who she was and who she wanted to be. Her mother knocked on the door. "How's the packing going?" "Almost done." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, baby." "Do you think what happened on that flight, everything that came after, do you think it actually changed anything? Or did it just make people more careful about getting caught?" Dr. Celeste Thompson sat on the bed next to her daughter. "That's a profound question. And I think the answer is both. Some people probably just learned to hide their prejudices better. But others, like that person who wrote you that letter, they actually examined themselves and changed. And even the ones who just got more careful, well, if their caution means fewer people experience discrimination, that's still progress." "But it's not enough," Amara said. "No, it's not enough. It's never enough. There will always be more work to do. But that doesn't mean the work you've done doesn't matter. You planted seeds that day, Amara. Some grew quickly. Others are still germinating. Some might not grow at all. But you planted them. That's what matters." Amara nodded, understanding. This wasn't about one moment, one flight attendant, one viral video. It was about the ongoing work of bending the moral arc of the universe toward justice, as her father liked to quote. It was slow work, frustrating work, necessary work. Her younger brother poked his head in. "Mara, Dad says dinner's ready. He made your favorite." Amara smiled. Her family had started calling her Mara as a nickname when she was little. She'd never minded it from them because they said it with love, because they also used her full name, because they understood the difference between a chosen nickname and a refused name. That night at dinner, her father raised his glass. A toast. To Amara, who taught us all that courage doesn't wait for adulthood. That justice doesn't wait for permission. That grace is not weakness but strength. We're proud of you, baby girl. We've always been proud of you. They clinked glasses and Amara looked around the table at her family. Her mother, who'd shown her what it meant to be brilliant and kind in a world that often demanded you choose one or the other. Her father, who'd taught her that the law was a tool for justice but only if people had the courage to use it. Her brother, who'd watched his sister become famous and somehow managed to stay completely unimpressed, treating her exactly the same as always, which she appreciated more than he knew. And she thought about her grandmother, thousands of miles away in Lagos, who'd chosen a name meaning grace and given it to a child who would spend her life learning what that really meant. After dinner, Amara went to her room and opened her laptop. She'd been working on something for weeks and now she finally finished it. An article titled "The Weight of Names: How a Flight Taught Me About Identity, Discrimination, and Change." She wrote about the flight, of course, but also about everything that came after. About the complexity of forgiveness. About the difference between individual prejudice and systemic discrimination. About how real change requires both personal growth and structural reform. About how speaking up is necessary but not sufficient, how it has to be followed by sustained effort, by policy changes, by ongoing vigilance. She ended with this. "My name is Amara. It means grace. I used to think grace was a soft thing, a gentle thing. But I've learned that grace can be fierce. Grace can stand firm. Grace can demand better while extending the possibility of redemption. When someone refuses to say your name correctly, they're telling you that your identity doesn't matter enough for them to make an effort. When someone asks where you're really from, they're telling you that you don't really belong. When someone questions whether you deserve to be in a space you've earned, they're telling you that people like you are only welcome as exceptions, not as a rule. But here's what I learned. You don't have to accept those messages. You can document. You can speak up. You can insist on respect. And when you do, you make it easier for the next person. You make it harder for discrimination to hide behind honest mistakes and cultural differences. Change is slow. Change is frustrating. Change requires more than one viral moment, more than one terminated employee, more than one policy reform. Change requires all of us committing to do better every single day. My grandmother gave me a name that means grace. I'm still learning what that means. But I think it means this: be strong enough to demand justice. Be wise enough to document truth. Be brave enough to speak up. And be gracious enough to believe that people can grow, can change, can become better than their worst moments, if they're willing to do the work. Say people's names correctly. All of them. Every time. It's not hard. It just requires respect. And respect is the foundation of everything else. She published the article on a platform for young writers. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. People commented with their own stories of names mispronounced, identities dismissed, moments of standing up or wishing they had. A teacher in California wrote that she was using the article in her classroom. A diversity trainer in Texas said she was incorporating it into her workshops. A parent in New York said she'd read it with her children and they'd had the best conversation about respect and identity they'd ever had. And somewhere, perhaps Rebecca Morrison read it. Perhaps she saw herself in those words. Perhaps she cringed at the memory of who she'd been. Perhaps she thought about who she wanted to be. Or perhaps not. Perhaps she was still making excuses, still blaming everyone but herself, still unable to see her own role in perpetuating discrimination. Amara couldn't control that. She could only control her own actions, her own words, her own commitment to making things better. The night before she left for college, she video called her grandmother one last time. "I'm scared, Grandma." "Of course you are, a child. New places are always frightening. But you carry your name with you. You carry your heritage with you. You carry the strength of everyone who came before you. And now you also carry the knowledge that you can stand up for yourself, that your voice matters, that you can create change. What if I fail?" Then you fail and you learn and you try again. That's what living means. But Amara, my dear, you've already succeeded in the most important way. You've become someone who doesn't stay silent in the face of injustice. You've become someone who documents and speaks up and insists on respect. That's not something you can fail at. That's something you are. Amara smiled through her tears. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, child. Now go get some sleep. Tomorrow is the beginning of your next adventure." Amara lay in bed that night, touching her grandmother's bracelet, thinking about the journey from that 9-year-old girl on a plane to this 18-year-old woman about to start college. So much had changed. So much had stayed the same. She was still Amara. Still the girl who loved words, who spoke 3 languages, who believed in the power of documentation and truth. But she was also more now. She was someone who understood that the fight for justice was ongoing, that every generation had to take up the work, that there were no final victories, only continued effort. She thought about Rebecca Morrison one last time. Not with anger, not anymore. Not even with the satisfaction of someone who'd won a battle. But with something closer to pity. Rebecca had lost so much that day, not just her job but her sense of herself as a good person. That must have been devastating. And yes, she'd brought it on herself through her own actions, through years of small cruelties that had finally been exposed. But it was still a kind of tragedy. Amara hoped she'd grown from it. She hoped she'd done the work of examining her prejudices, confronting her biases, becoming better. But even if she hadn't, even if she'd just learned to hide her discrimination more carefully, the system had still changed. The policies were different. The training was better. The accountability was real. That was something. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes something was enough to build on. Amara fell asleep thinking about names. About her own name, Amara, meaning grace. About her grandmother's name, Adiz, meaning princess. About all the names in all the languages around the world, each one carrying meaning, history, identity. Names mattered. They always had. They always would. And she would spend her life making sure people understood that. Making sure that saying someone's name correctly all the time, every time, wasn't seen as a favor or an accommodation but as basic human respect. Because that's what grace meant. Not acceptance of disrespect. Not silence in the face of discrimination. But insistence on dignity, coupled with the belief that people could learn, could grow, could become better. That was her grandmother's gift to her. Not just a name but a purpose. And Amara Thompson, 9-year-old spelling bee champion, viral video subject, catalyst for change, was just getting started. Years later, when people asked her about that day on the plane, about Rebecca Morrison, about the moment that changed everything, Amara would smile and say, "It wasn't one moment. It was a series of choices. The choice to correct someone's pronunciation. The choice to document what was happening. The choice to speak up when interviewed. The choice to keep pushing for real change, not just individual accountability but systemic reform. The choice to believe that even people who hurt us can grow. That's what grace means. Not weakness. Not acceptance. But the strength to stand firm in your dignity while still extending the possibility of redemption to others." And then she'd add with a slight smile, "Also, it helps if you can spell amaranthine under pressure." Because she never forgot that she was, first and always, a word person. Someone who understood that language had power, that names had meaning, that how we speak to and about each other shapes the world we build together. That's the story of Amara Thompson. Not a fairy tale where one moment fixed everything. Not a revenge story where the bad guy got what she deserved and everyone lived happily ever after. But a real story, complicated and messy and ongoing, about a girl who refused to be diminished and in doing so helped build a world where fewer people would have to fight the same battles. Her name is Amara. Amara. Amatra. Say it correctly. It's not hard. It just requires respect. And respect, as it turns out, is where everything begins. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of your own experiences or challenged you to examine your own assumptions, share it. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Stories about real people, Black excellence, quiet dignity, and the kind of courage that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Because these stories are stories, they matter. They've always mattered. And they deserve to be told, heard, and remembered correctly. Just like our names.